Happy Friday, monsters. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the MurderMurder.news podcast. We like to imagine these weekly episodes as weekly meetings of our very own true crime cult.
But not to worry, you've landed in the cult with all of the flower crowns and none of the flavor aid. We just like to fantasize about getting away from the world with all of our true crime friends, gathering around a campfire and telling spooky stories about the subject that brought us all together, murder.
If you don't know us already, allow us to introduce ourselves, your charismatic leaders. I'm Angelina, and I'm here with my peculiar pal, Aurora. How was your week?
Pretty good, feeling healthy again, which is just amazing. And
feels so good.
Yeah, just living my best non-COVID life. How about you?
Awesome. Pretty much the same. I've just been getting excited about little things like, grocery shopping and, not feeling like I'm going to fall over.
Yes.
It's been fun.
Well, just by tuning into our show today, of course, we consider you to be an honorary monster. But if you'd like to make it official, you can sign up to join the MMN commune on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/MurderMurder.news and pledge any amount you can spare to show your support for Murder Murder News. To show you how much we appreciate you, we'll send you your own little piece of murder merch, give you your own cool title like Deacon of Goats, and you'll have exclusive access to our regular Patreon-only content.
We post special video episodes at the end of every month, and we're actually just about to post our episode for January, which is a look back at the bizarre circus riot that resulted in the creation of the Toronto Police Force.
Whoa.
So you don't want to miss that.
I don't want to miss that.
Weird history. Yeah.
And we want to give a warm welcome to our newest patron. Welcome, James, Apprentice of Goats.
Yay, James.
Yay. We've named one of our baby goats in your honor, and your goat's name is Regan.
Inspired by The Exorcist.
Yes.
Spooky goat.
Spooky goat.
Before we dig in, let's take a look at some of the true crime stories making headlines this week. A body has been found in the search for Arielle Smith, a woman who has been missing from Virginia since January 12th. 28-year-old Arielle was last seen on a surveillance video at the end of her work shift on the 12th. She started her car, locked the store, set the alarm, and then went to the back of the store to throw out the trash in a dumpster. A coworker found her car still running in the parking lot the next morning, and Arielle was nowhere to be found. 50-year-old Tyrone Samuel was arrested on Saturday in connection with her disappearance.
On Monday, 36-year-old Terrence Darrell Kelly confessed to kidnapping 4-year-old Cleo Smith. Cleo was abducted from a campsite on Australia's west coast on October 16th of last year. Police found the missing 4-year-old 18 days later alone in a house in Carnarvon, which was 62 miles from the campground where she was kidnapped. Cleo appeared to be unharmed, and Darrell now faces up to 20 years in prison.
So if you've been listening, you already know that we've joined on with the Darkcast podcast network. And we're just going to share a little ad with you from one of our favorite Darkcast podcasts. We'll be right back.
I'm Edward October, and I'm here at the October Pod Ranch in the Great Smoky Mountains. Almost every night here, there's a ghost story party around the campfire. In my family, we believe that scary stories are best told around a roaring fire with a bottle of wine. That's why bold individualists everywhere choose Octoberpod for their retro horror thrills. Our stories are so good because they're told with such care, understated, moody, and above all, chilling. Why don't you join us? For retro horror of impeccable taste, choose Octoberpod. Find us on YouTube or at octoberpodvhs.com. Octoberpod, retro horror for bold individualists.
And we're back. Now, before we get into our story, we just want to say that while our tone is light in the intro, we do take the topics we're discussing very seriously. We are best buds, and we love chatting together every week and turning it into a podcast. We want to share that passion with you and to create a vibe where all of you feel like our best buds too. We joke about us friends forming a cult or commune, but that's not to diminish the severity of actual cult activity, which we do occasionally talk about in our weekly stories. We feel it's important to open up and talk about even the darkest aspects of humanity and the downright scary things that come up in the news. But we want to make it clear that our intention is never to sensationalize, and we always try to deliver these stories with respect to all parties involved or affected by the crimes we discuss.
We always post our sources in the episode description, so you can do some digging on your own if a story we present piques your interest. But you should know that if you ever feel we get it wrong, either in our tone or in the details of the case, we want to hear about it. We are more than happy to make a correction or give an update on a case we've discussed in previous episodes. So feel free to reach out to us at MurderMurder.news@gmail.com.
Some specific trigger warnings for this episode include sexual assault, verbal abuse, domestic violence, suicide, and drug use. If any of those are particularly sensitive subjects for you, you may want to skip this one and listen to one of our other episodes instead.
Today marks the 5-year anniversary of the disappearance of Elaine Park, who was 20 years old at the time, from Los Angeles, California. Our sources for today include To Live and Die in LA, which we do want to mention an addendum. While we were so grateful for all the rich interviews, cell phone data, and timelines put together by To Live and Die in LA, we are really not in agreement with the way some of this podcast was presented. We know that the true crime community has been bothered by the fact that Neil Strauss was the author of The Game, a book that encouraged men to pick up women by insulting them to break down their self-esteem. Super, super cringe.
Mm-hmm.
We did get a lot of valuable information from the podcast, but we'll come back to why we didn't appreciate the style of reporting in a bit. The rest of our sources include NBC Los Angeles, Medium, Crescent Valley Weekly, Web Sleuths, and many more, which will all be listed in our show notes.
Elaine was born on September 24th, 1996, and was known for being creative, artistic, and spunky. She was always popular and was the captain of her cheerleading squad at La Crescenta Valley Senior High. Always creative, she also wrote poetry. She loved dance and musical theater, wanted to be an actress, and performed in dance groups around Glendale. She was even in the same dance group as Billie Eilish at one point, but it doesn't sound like the two knew each other directly. Her parents divorced, and according to her mother, Susan, this had been hard on all of them. They'd gone from having a very comfortable life with Elaine's dad to struggling financially with Susan as a single mom taking care of Elaine and her older brother, Dustin. Elaine had gone through periods of depression, according to Susan. After high school, Elaine was attending Pierce College and also getting a few small roles and guest spots on shows like ER, Mad TV, Desperate Housewives, Crazy Stupid Love, and Role Models.
In July of 2015, when Elaine was 18 years old, she was raped backstage at a concert at the Orange County Observatory. She was there to see Father and Playboy Cardi and was drinking with her friends. Her friend Daisy could tell Elaine was drunk, but left her backstage because she wanted to go watch the show. According to accounts from others who were also there that night, Elaine had been taking Xanax, and it sounds like she was having a hard time standing up. She was definitely noticeably intoxicated. From witness testimony, 3 men, possibly some of the musicians performing that night, gang raped Elaine. There was allegedly a video taken, but Elaine didn't remember the video or the rape. Her friend Daisy said Elaine mentioned something about having a bad feeling that she had hooked up with someone in the bathroom, but the accounts of this night are admittedly a little confusing. We're not exactly sure how this happened, but at some point long after Elaine's rape, she appears to have either become aware of the video made of her sexual assault or actually saw it. In December of 2016, Elaine moved out of Daisy's house where she had been staying and moved back in with her mom, Susan. She also started blocking friends that she felt hadn't protected her the night of her rape, including Daisy.
On December 28, 2016, 1 month before her disappearance, Elaine posted 10 tweets about her assault. Here are the tweets. Nobody assesses things that are never brought to focus. Ladies, be sexually liberal. Embrace and love. Just put a price on it. Value yourself. As for the rape, the people involved know damn well who they are. but I don't fight fire with fire. I've forgiven, so now I can move on. I was so ashamed to be sexual in any way or express myself, but damn, I'm cute as hell, and it's time I treated myself like the queen that I am. It was ultimately my decisions that resulted in my mistakes. I blame no one. The important part is I can finally take care of myself right. The recent depths have realized made me come face to face with myself, and I had to accept that if I won't stand up for myself and women, nobody else will. I'm not making it a legal matter because the more important weight of the situation is that I stay true to myself and find myself justice. I understand rape is a word people don't like seeing on timelines, but awareness is the first step to healing and progressing before anything. I used alcohol as a way to numb myself and began lowering myself to how I was that night, but I realized my mistakes don't determine character. It was up until this year that I realized I was losing my peace of mind, and the only way to strengthen myself is to forgive myself and shed light. I was raped and nobody gave me closure about it, and I didn't remember it, so I didn't remember the pain. I just dropped it and never spoke. Elaine deleted her tweets shortly after posting them, but a friend of hers, Kristen, got screenshots of them before they were deleted.
Elaine's rape is significant because there had been rumors among her friends that this could have been the reason for her disappearance. Initially, there was buzz that Elaine's tweets had threatened to get justice for what happened to her, and the men involved were likely kind of a big deal in the music scene. It does appear that the tweets were not threatening to get justice, even though she definitely deserved to get justice, but rather she was just processing what had happened to her. Between her sexual assault and finding out about the video, Elaine started dating 21-year-old Divine Compere. Divine is the son of producer Shakim Compere, who founded Flavor Unit Entertainment with Queen Latifah in 1995. Shakim had been an executive producer on shows like Scream the TV show, The Equalizer, and a producer on lots of Queen Latifah's projects. The two dated off and on between November of 2016 and her disappearance on January 28th. According to Divine, the two met around Halloween at a friend's get-together.
The text history between Elaine and Divine is available on the Help Find Elaine Park Facebook page. So if you want to do a deep dive into what their relationship was like, feel free to go check that out. There's even a translation for boomers if you're like us and don't understand how 20-year-olds text about drugs and such. At a glance, it was pretty peaceful and respectful. They mostly just texted about meeting up and who was going to pick up the pot. The conversation is long since it's months worth of text, but there didn't ever seem to be any arguing or stressful conversations by text between the two of them in general. On January 3rd, a few weeks before her disappearance, Elaine broke up with Divine by text. At around 4 p.m., Divine texted, "Love you, babe," and Elaine texted back, "I love you enough to let you go and see you do good for yourself. I need this year to really invest in myself right now, so I'm going to grind and spend time alone until I can get myself real right. We can both improve and do better, you know? I appreciate everything you've done for me. You really taught me a lot about myself and showed me my value when nobody did, and I'm never going to forget that. I wish you knew how I see you through my eyes. My heart has a real special place for you."
Around 7 p.m., Divine texted back, "Fuck, dude, I can't lose you. You're all I got right now. I didn't want to hear that. I'm fighting for you. That's not what I want. If this is something you truly want like that, I can't control that, but I don't want this to happen this way." We have a little bit of insight in as to why Elaine broke up with Divine. We know that she was understandably upset by the realization of her sexual assault. According to Divine, he was aware that she had been raped and had been supportive of what she was going through. Divine says that the breakup was out of the blue and that he was away in Utah when he got the breakup text. Around this time, Elaine had lost her job as a waitress, which prompted her to drop out of school. From the sounds of it, this was temporary because of her finances, but needing to take a break from school after being sexually assaulted is also very understandable. It's likely that she just wanted to take some time for herself to get her thoughts together.
Her mom, Susan, also mentioned that not long before her disappearance, Elaine had asked what she thought she should do with the rest of her life. She was feeling a little lost and overwhelmed and just wasn't sure what path she should take. Susan told her that she could imagine her being in broadcasting. Elaine was a good writer and loved to travel, and Susan thought this would be a great fit for her daughter and could envision seeing her daughter on TV. Susan mentioned in an interview that she never imagined she would see her daughter on TV as a missing person instead of an actress or journalist. On the days leading up to Elaine's disappearance, she was fighting with her mom quite a bit about a strange insurance dispute. In May of 2016, Elaine was in a car accident with her high school friend Sadie. According to Sadie, neither one of them appeared to be injured from the accident, but the passengers in the other car were trapped. Elaine was not one to just sit by, and she got out of the car to try to help the other passengers. In the process, she cut up her hands, but Sadie believes she was fine after that. We do want to mention that it's normal to feel fine after a relatively minor car accident and then find out you could have whiplash or worse later. The adrenaline from the intensity of the moment can mask symptoms, and it's normal to realize hours later that you are sore or have a headache.
The situation that follows was discussed at great length on To Live and Die in LA, but we felt there might be a few holes in the version of the story they presented, and we're left with some doubts. According to the podcast, Susan next pressured Elaine into filing an insurance claim from her injuries from the accident. The podcast took the side that Elaine was not injured and that Susan was filing a fraudulent claim. According to Sadie, Elaine seemed to be fine after the accident, and there was a text exchange between Susan and Elaine where Elaine said the claim was fraudulent after she missed a chiropractor appointment. We have not seen all the text between the two, so there's a possibility that Susan did come up with the idea of filing this claim herself, and Elaine was totally unharmed from the accident. We would question if there could have been some medical bills covered by Susan for the accident, though. Did Elaine need to get any medical help for the cuts on her hands? Did she actually have whiplash and started to hurt after the accident and complained to her mom? How many times did she go to the chiropractor? There is a big difference in the way we would have talked to our friends versus our mothers about unseen injuries from a car accident. So it's possible Elaine just didn't want to complain to Sadie. There's absolutely nothing fraudulent or wrong with a mother filing an insurance claim for their daughter who lives in their house that they are paying for their medical bills. And it does seem possible that a 20-year-old who missed a chiropractor appointment because they were busy would just try to get their mom to back off them by saying it was a fraudulent claim, which absolutely sounds like something I would have done when I was 20.
For sure. No, Mom, we don't even need to be doing this.
Right? You felt crummy for 2 months and you're like, I'm about to die. And then 2 months later, when you finally feel fine, you're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, with no idea of the long-term effects, and you're 20 and you don't care.
Exactly.
It's
We don't really know the full story about what happened regarding the accident and the claim, but the text exchanges that occurred between Susan and Elaine were absolutely toxic and horrible.
We're going to read some of the texts from Susan, and just be warned, they are really awful. Fuck you. Manipulate the situation and not go to chiro, short for chiropractor, after you get what you want, you fucking shithead. You make me sick with my high blood pressure. You make me sick. Die, 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 die. I fucking hate that bullying ass of yours. You make me sick. Leave me alone. Die. You think there's no reason, but I have thoughts and plans behind it all, and you keep messing it up. You will not be able to say you're sorry after you kill me. This all sounds incredibly verbally abusive and is really hard to hear, but we do want to mention that To Live and Die in LA only released Susan's texts and not Elaine's. The show called their relationship toxic, and it sounds like there was a lot of fighting between the two of them, according to Elaine's brother Dustin. We don't want to make excuses for abusive language at all, but from our experience, moms and daughters can say some pretty awful things to each other, especially during the teenage years and early 20s. Whatever the case was with their relationship, the insurance claim was causing tension, and Susan was stressed out about money.
Let's get back to the timeline of Elaine's disappearance. On Thursday, January 26th, the day before Elaine's disappearance, Elaine's car broke down. She called Susan, who came to help her with her boyfriend, Jeff. According to Susan and Jeff, Elaine's car had run out of gas and the battery had died, and they brought her gas and jumped her car around 3:45 a.m. On Friday, January 27th, Susan says Elaine asked to borrow $20, and she said she would pay it back that evening after visiting her dad for some spending money. Susan sent her money through QuickPay, and Elaine said she would pay her back by 6 p.m. Around 5 p.m., Elaine went to see her father, Ray, to pick up weekend money, and he said she seemed perfectly normal. At 6:01, Elaine had not yet sent her mom the $20 back by QuickPay, so Susan texted her as a reminder. According to Susan, this was less about the $20 and more about teaching Elaine to be responsible. Around 7 p.m., Elaine's friend Sadie stopped by her house to get a curling iron. According to Sadie, they didn't really talk, and she just picked up the curling iron and left. At 7:30 p.m., Elaine leaves Susan's home in Glendale to drive to Divine's home in Calabasas. She arrived about 40 minutes later at 8:10 p.m. At 9:04 p.m., Elaine texted her mom back saying, "Yes, sorry, give me till later tonight."
Elaine and Divine take an Uber to see Triple X with Vin Diesel at AMC in Woodland Hills after Divine had said he didn't think she should be driving, though he was a little unclear as to why. It sounds like it could have just been because she was upset about something, and he said he wanted to take her mind off of it by going to see a movie. During his interview on To Live and Die in LA, he said they had not been drinking or taking drugs, but an Uber driver who picked them up that night said the two seemed like they were on something and were in good moods. They were being affectionate, according to the Uber driver. They take an Uber after the movie and get home around 12:43 a.m. Divine said when they got back to his place, they laid in bed to watch movies, and Elaine started to open up about some issues in her life, like fighting with her mom and her rape. Elaine either woke up early or was having trouble sleeping because she checked her phone around 3:20 a.m. and was on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. The next part is a little fuzzy because Divine's memory seems to conflict with the security cameras at his home. Divine has stated that Elaine woke up at 4 a.m. anxious and kind of singing to herself. He believed she was having a panic attack and later described it as maybe having a nightmare. He said she dressed unusually fast and took off from his home without saying goodbye. He then said he was telling her he didn't think she should leave because he could tell her head wasn't in a good place. He offered to get her an Uber, and he said she didn't say a word to him during all of this.
There's video footage of Elaine leaving the guest house where Divine lives alone. We will play the surveillance video on our YouTube for this episode, and you can also find it on Elaine's Facebook page. She is seen leaving the guest house, walking down the driveway and towards her car at 6:04 a.m. She is seen alone, and there does not appear to be any video of Divine leaving his home anytime around the time Elaine left. Note that this doesn't really make any sense with Divine's story since he believed she woke up at 4 a.m., but maybe he was just really out of it since it was so early. At 6:07 a.m., you can see Elaine's car driving away from the gated community, but because of the way the video is shot, you can't really tell if it's Elaine driving. This is the last confirmed sighting of Elaine, but because investigators were able to unlock her phone a couple of years after her disappearance, they were able to recover a little bit of her usage information around the same time.
At 6:28 a.m., Elaine's location is shared from her phone to Divine. She did not drop him a pin, but rather enabled her Share My Location feature on her iPhone. According to the private investigator, she had previously shared her location with Divine before they broke up and canceled her location sharing when they broke up. There are lots of questions about what this could have meant. Could Elaine have shared her location with Divine because it was kind of her version of making it Facebook official? Maybe she felt like they were getting back together after their date night. Could she have shared her location with him because they had actually made a plan to meet somewhere else? As mentioned, there is no CCTV footage of Divine leaving his house around this time. Is it possible Elaine was in trouble? Could she have run into a dangerous situation and this was a plea for help? One thing we would like to note is that according to Google Maps, the drive time between Divine's house and the location where Elaine's car was ultimately found was about 20 minutes away. If Elaine left his home at 6:07 a.m. and arrived on PCH where her car was found at 6:28, that would have been a 21-minute drive, and maybe she was in danger and this was the only signal she had time to fire off.
Unfortunately, we have no way of knowing because if there is information about her phone location for this morning, the information has not been released. Back to our questions about her sharing her location. We aren't sure if Divine even knew Elaine had shared her location with him. We did a little mini test where we tried sharing our location with a friend, and it didn't appear a notification pops up in the chat history with the person receiving the location. For example, it was in my text feed for my phone, but not in my husband's. Supposedly, an alert pops up on the receiver's phone letting them know, but in our test, that didn't even happen. It's possible this worked differently in 2017, though, like as an aside. The only way you can really tell if someone has shared their location with you on Apple's current interface is to click on their contact details. There's a good chance that Divine did not know Elaine's location was being shared with him unless the two had a conversation about it and he was expecting it.
At 7:13 a.m., the Pandora music app was playing on Elaine's phone. At 8:51 a.m., Susan sent 3 texts to Elaine saying, "Now, $20, now." Those messages were marked unread. At 9:32 a.m., Pandora sent a prompt asking if she was still listening, and it appeared to be unseen. At 10:13 a.m., Divine tried calling Elaine 3 times, but the calls were not answered. At 1:10 p.m., Sadie texted Elaine to see what she was doing. At 1:36 p.m., Susan tried calling Elaine 3 times, and she didn't answer. At 3:42 p.m., Elaine's phone pinged a cell tower in Malibu.
Susan was very worried at this point and called the Crescenta Valley Sheriff Station to report Elaine missing. They told her that because Elaine was 20, she should give it a little bit more time before reporting her missing. On Monday the 30th, around 9:30 a.m., Susan sent a message to Sadie on Facebook to see if she had heard from Elaine. At 11:48 a.m., she called the sheriff's office for a second time to report Elaine as missing. On Thursday, February 2nd, Elaine's car was found using the last ping from her cell phone at a cell tower in Malibu. Her charcoal gray 2015 Honda Civic was parked along Pacific Coast Highway just south of Coral Canyon Road in Malibu. The doors to her car were unlocked with the keys still in the ignition in the on position. Her keys, backpack, cell phone, purse, makeup, cash, and laptop were all found inside.
Police conducted a ground search using bloodhounds along the cliffs and shore, but there was no sign of Elaine anywhere in the area. So there has been speculation that she did not get out of her car and walk around. Elaine has not been seen or heard from since. We want to talk about potential theories as to what could have happened that night in hopes that this could stir up a memory for someone who may have seen something that morning or maybe knows someone who knows Elaine and has always seemed a little suspicious. We'll start with the positive. Maybe Elaine wanted to start a new life. Her life could have felt to her like it was kind of in a free fall. She was struggling with finding out about her rape and in such a horrible way. She'd lost her job and had to leave school, at least temporarily. Her parents' divorce had hit her hard, and we know from Susan that they were not getting along, and Elaine wasn't happy living at home. Perhaps she just wanted to disappear. For those of you familiar with Malibu or who have been invested in this case, Elaine's car was found on PCH within a 10-minute walk of 2 bus stops. It doesn't seem likely she would have left her phone, wallet, and laptop in her car to start a new life, but all of those items would have been easily traced if she did want to disappear.
Another possible theory is that Elaine's car broke down after leaving Divine's house and that she could have been abducted. Her car had run out of gas and needed jump the night before, and it's possible her battery wasn't holding a charge. I want to point out that on the podcast To Live and Die in LA, they mentioned that the only evidence we have that Elaine's battery had died is from Susan saying so, but we'll come back to that. We know that either way, her car did run out of gas the night before, and being a 20-year-old who was out of work, we don't know how much gas Elaine put in her car after it ran out. If her battery had died the night before, it's definitely possible it could have happened again. And then there's the coincidence of the timing for her location share from Elaine's phone to Divine's. As we mentioned, the drive time estimated by Google Maps from Divine's home to the location of Elaine's car on PCH was 20 to 22 minutes, and she shared her location with Divine at 21 minutes after leaving his home. The stretch where Elaine's car broke down also was not super desolate. She was right by Coral Beach, the Malibu Seafood Market and Cafe, the Coral Canyon Trailhead, and an RV park. Not to offend anyone who really likes camping, but we've heard far too many tragic stories about bad things happening amongst campers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as a side note, I want to ask you, did you hear anything about whether they checked out Elaine's car after to see if it had any other issues?
So first of all, what I do know about that is her car did not look like there was a struggle. It did not look like somebody, like she had clawed at her car or anything was broken inside. Everything was kind of neatly stacked in the front seat.
What about like that there was an issue like with, say, the alternator or something like that would have drained the battery every time she turned it on?
So the deal is that I don't know what's known about that, because if her car was left on, it would have drained the gas and the battery. So I'm not sure what they know about the car, like how soon it had run out of gas or like how long it had been broken down. I have not heard that information.
If she was borrowing $20, she really could have put $5 in. Like that's,
Right.
Likely.
And like when I was 20, if my parents gave me $20 and I had to like just get to Calabasas, I would have put $5 of gas in and then been like, I'm buying popcorn. So
and I'll deal with it tomorrow.
Exactly. I think that's possible. And also, I don't know. I don't know much about cars. I have no car knowledge, but I do know that my dad, who was a mechanic, has always told me that once your car runs out of gas, it pulls impurities like from your engine into the engine, and it can be more likely to have problems after that.
Good to know.
Yeah. And I don't know how true that is. I don't know how true that is with newer cars. I know that my 2001 Chevy Cavalier was never quite the same after I ran out of gas once on a freeway when I was about Elaine's age.
Actually, I feel like I can attest to that as well. Like I remember my last car was never the same after I ran out of gas. It got pretty rocky road after that. But
right.
But it wasn't like her car being a 2015. It was that year, right?
Yeah, so it would have been a very new car. That's true.
Couple years before.
Yeah. So I don't know. If anybody does have any information about the state her car was found in, I believe from what I've heard, there's not been much information released about that. I think the police had investigated that, but I don't think that that's public knowledge. But if we're wrong, please let us know, because I would be very curious about that as well.
Okay, so that brings us to another theory that has been popularly brought up on Reddit. The location where Elaine's car was found is about 8 miles from the entrance to Malibu Creek State Park, which was where some of you might remember a serial killer was active around this time. The man believed to be the Malibu Park shooter, Anthony Rauda, was arrested in October of 2018. The killer shot at least 10 people between 2016 and 2018 and was also charged with robbery around the Calabasas area. Admittedly, the Malibu Park shooter's MO does not seem to match with the way Elaine might have disappeared, since she has not been found and he seemed to just shoot his victims. Still, we do know that serial killers' tactics change over time, and the fact that Elaine was very small could have made her an easy target in general.
There's also been talk that Elaine could have been suicidal and was seemingly in an agitated state when she left Divine's home. The area where her car was found was right by Coral Beach on the south and hiking trails to the north. This theory doesn't hold a ton of weight because the beach in this area is very flat. Like it's just what you would think of a Malibu beach as looking like. It's very pretty and there's not like a lot of rocks and things. She could not have jumped off a cliff into the water, and she would have had to walk out into the water, which means her body likely would have washed up onto the shore not long after. So police don't really consider this to be super viable. There hasn't been any sign of Elaine on the hiking trails in this area, though there were search parties with both dogs and humans.
And of course, there are theories that those closest to Elaine could have done her harm. There has always been speculation that Divine could have been involved in her disappearance, though the police have questioned him and stated that he is not a suspect. He was the last person to see Elaine alive, which is why he has seemed suspicious to some. He has, however, been very willing to talk to the police. He helped in early searches for Elaine, and listening to an interview with him on To Live and Die, he seemed to really care for her. There was not any obvious sign of an argument between the two, which makes it seem as though he would lack motive. The two seemed happy in the Uber, according to the driver, and there was no evidence they had had a fight. We would love to have some clarity on why Elaine shared her location with Divine that night, but it seems just as likely that it was either a sign of distress or that she was letting him know he was back in her inner circle after he was there for her earlier in the night. The biggest piece of evidence that would point to Divine's not being involved is that he was not seen on CCTV footage leaving his home. The private investigator for Elaine's case has pointed out that there's a possibility he could have left his house on foot to go after Elaine while avoiding cameras, but that seems unlikely. It would have been over a 4-hour walk from his house to Elaine's car, though there's always a possibility that he left his home and caught up with her after she drove past the last camera in his community.
Another person who's been brought up often after To Live and Die aired is Susan, Elaine's mom. We just want to say that we actually think the way this unfolded on the podcast was pretty unethical and disturbing, and it didn't really make any sense to us. But let's talk it out anyways, just because it is a theory. Neil Strauss started to believe Susan was involved after recovering messages from Elaine's iCloud, which revealed the abusive text from Susan to Elaine saying, "Die, die, die." It was admittedly hard to hear, but those texts were sent in July of 2016, so this particular fight was not a recent one. We haven't seen a text exchange between Susan and Elaine, but Neil described the relationship as toxic. It's absolutely possible that Susan was verbally abusive with Elaine, and it's possible she was physically abusive with her as well. We just don't know. Her brother Dustin said the two of them would yell at each other, but had not seen any physical abuse, but it's always possible it still happened. As we pointed out earlier, it's possible they both spoke to each other this way since we haven't seen texts from Elaine to Susan. So we're just not quite sure what to think about the relationship. Like, I know that I said much worse things to my mom when I was 20 that she said to me, and that there was a lot of whole lot of nastiness. It's not great.
And
but
Susan said both die and when you kill me. So, I mean, maybe they were really just saying that to each other all the time. That's the dynamic.
Right. And I would be curious to see Elaine's text, because if Elaine was just being peaceful and okay, mom, then these texts are very abusive. But if they were fighting back and kind of escalating the conversation to each other, that definitely changes the dynamic. So I'd be curious to see
it's not healthy,
those.
but it doesn't make anyone a murderer. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, mothers and young daughters often have super toxic relationships that don't lead to murder. And as we've seen discussed in many forums, there's a difference between Korean parenting and American parenting. And many have spoken up saying their Korean mothers parented them in a similar way and were not murderers. It's been brought up that Susan wasn't crying enough or reacting in a way that Neil and his team thought was appropriate way for a mother to grieve their daughter's disappearance. But again, cultural differences were being ignored here. And many have spoken up about the difference in parenting in Korean families. But also, we heard Susan get choked up several times during the course of interviews with To Live and Die. The emotion felt really real to us, and Susan said many times she had remorse over not being more loving to Elaine and how she wanted to make it up to her. And it just did not feel like scripted or acting or whatever to me. It felt like she had real regret over her daughter missing and not being able to reconcile.
And if she's getting choked up, which is, that podcast came out years later still, right? Than Elaine's disappearance.
Yes.
So if she's still getting choked up at that time, who's to say, how she processed it all the time in between, Elaine's disappearance and the time that we actually heard her on the show, she could have had many up and downs,
exactly. And the crying, I just feel like when somebody is fake crying, referred to by crocodile tears, it's just kind of ooh, you're really playing it up and you're starting off crying and you're taking a minute to wipe your tears and she's trying.
You're sobbing and no one sees any moisture there. You're just
Yeah. And the way she was crying, it's she's literally trying to talk and get through a sentence and it's kind of breaking up her speak a little bit, but she's continuing. It was so natural.
That sounds really
that
genuine.
She should win an Oscar if that was fake, because
Oh.
like it was. It made me feel very emotional listening to it. And I think that's like another sign of being able to tell if somebody's being authentic, is if it like makes you feel like, oh my God, like too, that, you know.
Totally. There was some other potential evidence brought up in the podcast. Susan's alibi on the night Elaine disappeared was inconsistent. She couldn't remember if she stayed at her boyfriend's house or was at home, or if she came home early that night because she'd been worried about Elaine's car breaking down again. We can see how that looked bad, but Devine also couldn't remember specific details about his night, and the podcast didn't seem to find that suspicious. The deal is, no one knew Elaine was missing yet. Memory is a tricky thing, and we sometimes remember more details about traumatic or upsetting events, which can help if we need an alibi, but Susan had no reason to think this night was any different than any other night. And I want to say, as a side note, I thought about this most, I think, after listening to Serial, but they were talking about how if you remember everything about a random night, like that's more suspicious than anything.
That's
like if
really
I'm going to ask you right now, Aurora, like what were you doing on December 27th? Like if you can tell me what your day was, like that's suspicious.
That's a really good point. And the deal is that Susan had never been questioned by the police because, first of all, they're ignoring her. And secondly, they never considered her a suspect. So she's never laid out this timeline before. She's doing it for the first time for the podcast. And they're like, well, what were you doing? And like, she's having to remember
totally
it
natural for her to
months
forget
and maybe even a year later at this
really
point.
know.
Exactly. So she's like pulling up her cell phone records and seeing when she texted her boyfriend and stuff, which is very logical. She's trying to like help them and give them what they need. But you're right. The fact that she's not like, I know I was here and at this time and I saw this, like it seems less suspicious.
Like, why would you know that? Why would you have like mentally like committed that to memory?
That's a very good point. Yeah.
The most substantial evidence presented against Susan was that the team had tricked Susan into having cadaver dogs come to her house by telling her they thought maybe Elaine had been kidnapped at home and taken elsewhere, and they wanted to rule it out as a possibility. Susan agreed to the search because she didn't think she had anything to hide. The cadaver dogs did have a couple hints in Elaine's room and in their storage shed. The show explained that cadaver dogs can, of course, pick up on the scent of decomp or large amounts of blood, but can also pick up on the scent of someone having cut themselves in general. This was disturbing and should warrant more of an investigation in general, but we have to remember that this is circumstantial evidence and doesn't seem to fit with the rest of the timeline of when Elaine was last seen.
The doubts we have about Susan's involvement start with the fact that she was really heading this search. The Glendale Police Department had never been interested in pursuing Elaine's case from day one. Susan had been fighting for answers, calling the police with theories, calling Devine to get his story, hanging up flyers, and starting a Facebook group with tips about her disappearance. It doesn't make a ton of sense to kill someone, seemingly get away with it, since the police didn't seem to care, and then spend years trying to get the police to solve the case if you have something to hide. Like, why not just leave it alone?
Yeah, I was thinking that the only possible way that someone would be so persistent with the investigators and trying to get people to solve the case is if they were trying to pin it on someone else. But of course, then they'd constantly be pointing them in the same direction that didn't seem to make sense to them. And there's really not any of that behavior. So she's just saying, take a look at this.
Her desperation for answers seemed very real. Like she was like, how about this person? How about this person? Have they looked into this person? Like it's...
Yeah, like check it all out.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then there's the logistics of Elaine being in Calabasas and her car being found in Malibu, combined with the call and the text timestamps. Let's say Elaine left Calabasas just after 6 a.m. with the intent on driving home to Glendale. According to Google Maps, the drive time on a Saturday morning at that time would take 30 to 40 minutes. Elaine would have been home around 6:40 a.m. If she was home, it seems like Susan didn't realize it because she'd sent her 3 texts at 8:51 a.m., asking for the $20 that she had lent Elaine the day before. If Elaine was home and Susan knew it, she likely would have just gone to her room since we knew they fought all the time at home. If Susan had harmed Elaine already, it's possible she would have sent texts to Elaine to cover her tracks. But what's the possibility she would have sent texts asking for her money instead of something more obviously caring, like, where are you, Elaine? You didn't come home tonight. It seems pretty unlikely to us that Elaine was home at that time, which means she likely didn't make it home at all. Elaine's cell phone last pinged a tower in Malibu at 3:42 p.m., which means her car was already returned to Malibu at that time. Is it possible Susan killed Elaine and moved her car down to Malibu in that amount of time? Sure. But I'm also curious how much Susan knew about Elaine's whereabouts the night before, her relationship with Divine, and where he lived. From what we've been told, they were not close, and she didn't tell Susan anything. Would Susan have known where Divine's house was in Calabasas to drive Elaine's car there and leave it so close to his house?
There's always a possibility that Susan had something to do with Elaine's disappearance. And sure, there's a small chance that there could have been some kind of like accident and Susan was trying to hide it. It doesn't seem that realistic to us, and we just want to remind those that think maybe it was Susan. She's never been named a person of interest by the police, and those leaving nasty comments about her on Facebook are likely leaving those nasty comments for a grieving mother with a missing daughter.
Gross.
Yeah, it's just so weird. And like, you can think she's guilty all day long to yourself. You can talk about it with friends. Like, that's fine. Everybody's allowed to have theories, but please don't go.
And make a gentle side note. We're having a speculation.
Sure.
We don't know,
Sure.
You got to check it out.
But like, please just don't go to Elaine's missing person page and leave a gross comment for Susan. It's not nice. She's not been found guilty by any means. And if she's innocent, then she's really already dealing with a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal harassment.
Yeah.
The next theory, and we find this one particularly interesting, though it's been hard to find information about the potential suspect. Elaine had been dating a man nicknamed Lolo not long before her disappearance. Elaine broke things off with him after the two of them were arrested when Lolo was found to have a handgun by the police. Her friend Sadie described Lolo as a stalker and said Elaine had been worried about having to testify about the incident. She was seemingly afraid of him, and she was supposed to testify around the time of her disappearance. Lolo had been released from jail in Venice Beach 2 days before her disappearance. He had been sending her aggressive messages in the following text chain. Lolo, should I give you space or something if I scare you? You make me mad as fuck. I give you so much attention and you don't really pay attention to it. Elaine, you're being too crazy blowing my shit up. Please give me some space. Lolo, I'm literally going to go to your house and fight you. You better fucking reply, motherfucker. You make me angry at times. We weren't able to verify how long before Elaine's disappearance the two had been in contact, but it's certainly a possibility that Lolo got out of jail, was following Elaine, and had known she spent the night at Divine's. He could have been following her. In an interview with Lolo, he said the last time he had seen her was when the two were arrested, but then he changed his story and said they had hung out once or twice since.
The last theory is that the men who raped Elaine could have harmed her. In Divine's interview, he mentioned that someone had tweeted something about Elaine's rape. It's possible he was confusing texts about her rape with something else, but it's possible others were talking about it since there was a video. We don't know who raped Elaine or if authorities have seen the video, but it could be related. One of the most disturbing things about Elaine's case is how many people of interest who popped up exhibited abusive behavior towards her during the investigation. For someone being known for being so sweet, creative, friendly, and talented, it sounds like she was really dealing with so much pain and a lack of love in a time leading up to her disappearance.
And that is the disappearance of Elaine Park. Elaine's case is still open and active, so we encourage anyone with any information about what could have happened to contact the Glendale Police Department at 818-548-4911 or Crime Stoppers at 800-222-8477. You can also check out the Help Find Elaine Park Facebook page. So, watching anything crimey this week?
Nothing like quite crimey, but I've been doing like more podcasts again, like less TV. And
Nice.
I've heard recommended by like quite a few friends to check out. It's called Harsh Reality, the story The Story of Miriam. The Story of Miriam Rivera. I just made a new title for them. Have you heard of this?
No, not at all.
So it's about this British reality TV show, I think like in the early 2000s, where it's like a dating show where the twist is it's 6 men trying to compete for like a woman, like to like date this woman. And then they decide after having the men compete for them during the series that they'll then reveal that the woman is actually transgender. Like what could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? And
only everything.
Yeah. So like just a really like gross exploitative idea like in general.
Yeah.
And then I don't quite know like exactly how it ends, but like the Jenny Jones murder like pops up to mind and other similar things. Like it just seems like a terrible, terrible idea. And it's not like necessarily true crimey related, except while listening to it, was like researching where Miriam is now. And it sounds like she died mysteriously in 2019 and it was ruled a suicide by police in Mexico, but people believe she was actually murdered.
Are you freaking kidding me? Wow.
So that's
amazing, but horrible.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if the podcast covers that aspect or just the TV show part, but I will definitely be doing a deep dive. If not.
Yeah, it sounds like the podcast is at least a good launching pad for that.
Yeah, and the podcast is great. I'm only one episode in, but so far it's really well done. So I definitely recommend that. How about you? What are you watching?
Well, I was saying to Louis, like, I haven't watched anything crimey again. And he was like, well, I mean, the show we're watching is like full of crime. And I'm like, yeah, I guess actually it is. So we've been watching The Righteous Gemstones, which is a fictional story and a comedy. You've heard of it, I guess?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
It's cool because it has some of our favorite crimey elements. It's a little bit culty. It's basically the story of an entire family, I guess 3 generations of the family of sort of evangelical preacher types, but the kind that have like a big flashy church with lights that gets on TV shows and stuff like that.
Nice.
So they're running exploitative scams and getting all kinds of money. And then, as an aside, they get involved with some pretty ridiculous shit. There's, murders and other things. So it's very entertaining, particularly if you're not Christian, I would assume. But it's good.
That sounds really good. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. The other thing, like, I haven't watched anything else cool, but I've got my eye on a couple of things too. Like, my client was telling me about The White Lotus. Have you heard of that?
I have seen that.
Oh, you've seen it. How'd you like it? I heard it was like, my client said it was like 9 Perfect Strangers, but a little more funny, I guess.
I don't know. I had mixed feelings about it. I don't know that I cared to get into my mixed feelings in this space, but I don't know. Part of it felt like a little like this was made by white people for white people, like trying to teach us teach a lesson about like racism and class, but like it felt like they missed the mark to me. Like it's like all of the people of color like are working at the resorts, like as, like serving like the white people. And I feel like they were trying to do that on purpose, but they still like just I don't know. It just felt like they missed the mark for me. I didn't love it. Gotcha. And I know a lot of people loved it. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know. I am a white woman. It's like whatever, but it felt like. I don't
know. It kind of sounds like a thing.
Yeah.
Like kind of just like hearing that kind of turns me off it a little bit. But
I did not love it. It was entertaining. But I thought that, also, like the guy that's the writer for it, his name's literally like something like John White. like his last name is White. And I'm like, why is he writing?
Let's hear from another John White.
Can we not have like white people writing shows dealing with things like race? Like, I think we've said enough things.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're going to say something, at least partner up with somebody who has, an actual outlook on these things. Jesus.
Right.
So maybe instead watch, I've just seen because my pal that I was in roller skating class with that I was saying worked on the American series Ghosts, just posted that it has been renewed for season 2. So that's good news.
Okay, I have to get caught up on that. Maybe. I've enjoyed the first few episodes and it's a little hard for me to find here in Hungary. So I haven't seen all of it. But from when I saw it, it's very cute and very funny. Oh, I just wanted to give a thank you to our listeners. We got some great little positive feedbacks this week. I know we've complained before about how we've always been very nervous about posting anything to YouTube because especially when we used to make
they're brutal.
When we were in the videos, it was just comments about our appearance and such. And it was just, we're like, why are we doing this? Let's stop doing this.
Yeah.
But we've gotten so many nice comments recently, engaging with the videos. Thank you so much. I don't remember the screen name, but the person said they really enjoy listening to us each week. It really made our week hearing that and getting some positive feedback because this can be kind of a brutal space sometimes. So thank you for the positive feedback.
Yay, thanks. Well, I guess that is enough murder for this week. If you require just a little bit more murder, you can get your fill on the OG MurderMurder.news with the latest breaking true crime news every day of the week.
You can also find us on Instagram, where we keep the true crime memes coming, on Twitter, where you might find your second favorite spooky podcast, because that's where we connect the most with our other podcast friends on the Darkcast Network. You can find us on TikTok, where this week we told the story of the only murder case in the U.S. to get a conviction based on the testimony involving a ghost, which is such a great story.
Oh, yeah.
On Facebook, you can find our page just for searching for us. And both on Facebook and on TikTok, we are on our way to 10,000 followers. So please give us a hand by following us on every possible platform today because we need your positivity.
Oh, yeah, we need it. And while you're on Facebook searching for Murder Murder News, you'll also see our group pop up. And that group is where you can join our virtual book club. We are taking our sweet time getting this book club rolling into 2022. But that's fine because we planned on a February start and we've already got our nominations out. So keep an eye on the group. In the next days, we'll have our selections finalized and the Facebook events created for our next few book club meetings.
And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or on your podcast platform of choice if you like what you're hearing. We want to know so we can keep making the true crime podcast episodes you want in your life. And reviews help new fans find us and help spread the word that it's worth your while to tune in to Murder Murder News, which we hope it was.
Yes. Thank you for listening. Hope y'all have a wonderful week. See you in February.
Bye, friends.
Bye.